The smell of burnt oil and stale coffee is stuck in my nose. The man behind the counter does not look at me. He is wiping grease off his hands with a red rag, and he is shaking his head slowly. He tells me the transmission is destroyed. He says the rebuild will cost $4,200. I feel the blood draining from my face. My hands start to tremble so violently that I almost drop my phone. I look down at the banking application on the screen. It shows exactly $412.30. That is every single penny I have in the world. I try to keep my voice steady. I ask him if I can just take the keys back. I ask him if I can sit in the vehicle in the parking lot for one night while I figure out a plan. He stops wiping his hands. He looks me in the eye for the first time and his face is hard. He says no. He says the vehicle is a liability because it cannot move. He says I cannot stay on the property after they lock the gates. I look at the clock on the wall. It is 5:55 in the evening. The sun is already going down. I am wearing my teaching clothes. I am wearing a blazer and dress slacks. 6 hours ago, I was standing in front of 30 high school seniors explaining the economic collapse of the 1930s. I was telling them about shanty towns and bread lines. I was the authority figure. I was the one with the master's degree and the tenure. Now I am standing in a lobby that smells like gasoline, and I am realizing that I am the history lesson. My home is a Num Hai Nin, Hong Tram Mui Sao, Honda Odyssey, and it is dead. My clothes are in the back seat. My toothbrush is in the glove compartment. If I cannot get into that van, then I do not have a bed. I do not have a roof. I do not have safety. The mechanic walks to the front door and flips the sign to closed. He reaches for the light switch. Darkness falls over the lobby. I teach the American dream all day long, but tonight I am going to be sleeping on a park bench.
That silence you just heard is the loudest sound in the American economy right now. It is the sound of a door locking. It is the sound of a service bay light flickering off. It is the sound of a woman who did everything she was supposed to do, realizing that the rule book she followed for 20 years has been thrown into the trash can. You are listening to the Financial Therapy Podcast, and I am your host, Sam. Today, we are not telling a story about bad luck. We are not telling a story about a car that broke down. If you think this is an episode about a transmission failure on a Num Hai Nin Kong Tram Mui Sao Honda Odyssey, then you are missing the point entirely. This is a story about the structural collapse of the American middle class. It is a story about a phenomenon that we used to call poverty, but that we have rebranded with cute hashtags and soft lighting to make it palatable for social media. We call it van life. We call it tiny living. We call it downsizing. But let us be honest about what is actually happening in cities like Austin and San Diego and Seattle and New York. We are witnessing the birth of the working homeless. These are not people struggling with addiction. These are not people who refuse to work. These are the people who teach your children history. These are the people who serve your coffee at 7 in the morning. These are the nurses who check your blood pressure. And when their shift ends, they do not go home to a white picket fence or a garden apartment. They go to a parking lot. They cover their windows with black felt, so the police do not knock on the glass. They sleep with one eye open because they are terrified that someone will realize they are living inside a machine. I want you to listen to Elena today because she represents a terrifying new reality. She has a master's degree. She has a tenure-track position. She earns $68,000 a year. In any other decade in American history, she would be buying a starter home. She would be planning a vacation. She would be saving for retirement. But in this economy, she is one mechanical failure away from sleeping on a park bench. We have created a system where you can do everything right. You can get the grades. You can get the degree. You can get the job. And the market will still chew you up and spit you out onto the pavement. The rent burden in this country has become a predator. When your housing costs eat up 50 or 60 or 80% of your take-home pay, you are not living. You are suffocating. You are treading water in the middle of the ocean, holding a heavy stone and waiting for your muscles to give out. And that is what happened to Elena. Her muscles gave out. The transmission on her van was the only thing standing between her and the abyss. And when that transmission died, the illusion of her life died with it. I know that many of you listening right now are feeling the exact same pressure. You might not be sleeping in a van yet, but you look at your bank account on the 25th of the month and you feel that cold knot of fear in your stomach. You look at the rising cost of eggs and milk and rent and insurance, and you wonder how much longer you can hold on. You wonder if you are the crazy one. You wonder if you are the failure. I am here to tell you that you are not crazy. You are not a failure. You are living in a math equation that does not solve. Before we descend further into Elena's story, I want to offer you a lifeline. We talk about heavy things on this show. We talk about the things that polite society ignores. But we also talk about solutions. We talk about how to build a fortress around your finances so that when the transmission breaks or the landlord raises the rent, you have a shield. I have a private email list where I send out the specific strategies and the raw data that I cannot share on this public platform. It is a community of people who are waking up and refusing to be victims of this broken system. If you want to join us, go to the link in the show notes right now. Do not wait until you are standing in a mechanic's lobby with $400 to your name. Go to the link, sign up, get the tools you need to fight back. Because as you are about to hear, the descent happens much faster than you think. It does not happen over years. It happens over months. It happens one compromise at a time. It happens when you trade your apartment for a storage unit. It happens when you trade your kitchen for a cooler. It happens when you convince yourself that living in a car is a temporary adventure instead of a desperate survival tactic. Elena is going to take us back to the beginning. She is going to show us the mask she wears. She is going to show us how hard she works to maintain the facade of the respected teacher while she is secretly brushing her teeth in a gas station bathroom. It is a story of pride. It is a story of shame. And it is a warning. If you think your degree protects you, listen closely. If you think your salary protects you, listen closely. If you think this cannot happen to you, then you need to turn the volume up as high as it will go. Because Elena thought the exact same thing. She thought she was too smart to end up here. She thought she was too educated to end up here. And yet here she is, standing in the dark, waiting for a miracle that is not coming. Let us go back to before the van died. Let us go back to the double life. Let us look behind the curtain of the American dream and see the nightmare that is hiding in the shadows. This is Elena's confession. Before we let Elena speak again, I need to stop you right there. I know exactly what is happening in your brain right now because I have seen the comments section on every single financial video on the internet. There is a voice in your head that is already judging her. There is a voice that is saying $68,000 is a lot of money. There is a voice saying she must be terrible at budgeting. There is a voice saying she probably spends too much on latte coffees, or subscription services, or designer handbags. You need to take that voice and you need to silence it immediately. Because if you look at this situation through the lens of personal irresponsibility, you are going to miss the crime scene that is right in front of your face. We are going to do a forensic autopsy on Elena's finances right now. We are going to look at the numbers with cold, hard objectivity. And when we are done, you will see that this was not a failure of budgeting. This was a mathematical eviction. Let us start with the income. Elena is a teacher with a master's degree and 15 years of experience. Her contract states she earns $68,000 a year. On paper, that sounds like a solid middle-class income. It sounds like safety. But you cannot spend your gross income. You can only spend what hits your checking account after the government and the institutions take their cut. Let us strip that number down. First, you have federal taxes. Then you have state taxes. Then you have Social Security and Medicare. Then as a teacher, she has mandatory pension contributions because the state requires her to pay for her own retirement. Then she has union dues. Then she has health insurance premiums deducted directly from her paycheck. By the time that money actually travels from the school district to her bank account, that $68,000 has been stripped down to the bone. Her actual net take-home pay is approximately $4,100 per month. Now, hold that number in your mind. $4,100. That is her entire arsenal. That is every bullet she has to fight the war of survival. Now let us look at the enemy. The enemy is the housing market. Elena was living in a standard one-bedroom apartment. She was not living in a luxury penthouse. She was not living in a gated community with a concierge. She was living in a working-class complex near the highway. For years, her rent was $2,200. That was already high. That was already more than 50% of her income. But she made it work. She scrimped. She saved. She survived. And then the letter came. It was not a letter from a mom-and-pop landlord. It was a letter from a private equity firm that bought the building. They looked at the market data. They ran an algorithm. And that algorithm decided that the market rate for a one-bedroom unit in that zip code was now $3,500. They did not care that she was a teacher. They did not care that she had been a loyal tenant for 5 years. They simply demanded the new rate, $3,500. Now, do the math with me. Take her income of $4,100, subtract the new rent of $3,500. What is left? $600. That is it. $600 to cover everything else in her life for 30 days. That $600 has to cover electricity. It has to cover water. It has to cover internet, which she needs to grade papers and answer emails from parents. It has to cover gasoline to get to work. It has to cover car insurance. It has to cover food. And we have not even talked about her debt yet. Elena has $55,000 in student loans from the master's degree that she was required to get to keep her teaching license. The monthly payment on those loans is roughly $600. So let us look at the equation again. $600 left over after rent, minus $600 for the student loan. The result is zero. $0 for food, $0 for gas, $0 for lights. This is what we call a 100% utilization of resources just to have a roof and a degree. The Department of Housing and Urban Development defines anyone paying more than 30% of their income on rent as rent burdened. They define anyone paying more than 50% as severely rent burdened. Elena was facing a rent burden of 85%. That is not a burden. That is a strangulation. That is an economic death sentence. There is no amount of coupon clipping that solves an 85% rent-to-income ratio. There is no amount of skipping coffee that solves a $3,500 rent demand. This is why I get angry when I hear people talk about financial literacy as the only solution. You cannot budget your way out of a rent hike that exceeds your entire disposable income. This is a structural failure. The housing market has detached itself from the labor market. Wages have grown by tiny percentages while housing costs have doubled or tripled. And the people caught in the middle are people like Elena. She did the math that night. She sat at her kitchen table and she looked at the numbers and she realized that if she signed that lease, she would starve. She would literally not have money to buy groceries. So the critics will say she should have just moved. They will say she should have found a cheaper apartment. And that brings us to the second trap. The trap of the deposit. In the United States of America, it is expensive to be poor. To move into a new apartment, even a cheaper one that costs $2,000 a month, requires a massive injection of cash. You need the first month of rent. You need the last month of rent. You need a security deposit. You need moving costs to move into a cheaper apartment. Elena would have needed to produce approximately $6,000 to $9,000 in cash up front. But remember, she has been living paycheck to paycheck for years, paying off her student loans. She does not have $9,000. She does not have $900. So she is trapped in a burning building with no exit. She cannot stay because the rent is too high. She cannot leave because the cost of moving is too high. This is the catch-22 that creates homelessness. It is not always about addiction or mental illness. Sometimes it is just a liquidity crisis. It is a cash flow problem that spirals into a housing emergency. Elena looked at her options. She looked at the apartment she loved. She looked at the empty bank account. And she made a calculation. She thought she could cheat the system. She thought she could opt out of the housing market entirely. She looked at her minivan, and she saw a lifeboat. She thought if she could just live in the van for a year or two, she could save that $3,500 a month. She could pay off her debt. She could build a savings cushion. She could finally be free. It was a seductive thought. It felt like a rebellion. It felt like she was taking control back from the landlords and the banks. But she forgot one crucial thing. A minivan is not a house. A minivan is a depreciating asset made of metal and plastic and rubber. It is not designed to protect a human being from the elements or from society or from the law. She thought she was solving a math problem, but she was actually stepping into a psychological war zone. She did not ask for help because she was ashamed. She did not go to her union. She did not go to her family. She decided to bear this burden alone because she believed that as an educated professional, she should be able to solve her own problems. And that pride, that refusal to admit defeat, was the final nail in the coffin. She tried to outsmart a system that is rigged against her. And now she is going to tell you how that decision slowly dismantled her life, piece by piece. She is going to take us inside the van. She is going to show us what it feels like to grade papers by the light of a street lamp while praying that the police do not tap on the window. She thought she was saving money, But she was actually paying a price far higher than $3,500 a month. She was paying with her dignity. She was paying with her sanity. And eventually she would pay with her safety. Listen to how the trap closed around her.
The alarm on my phone does not go off at 7 in the morning like a normal person. It goes off at 4:30 in the morning. It vibrates against the hard plastic of the cup holder next to my head because if I let it ring, it might wake up the security guard patrolling the Walmart parking lot. I do not wake up in a bed with crisp sheets. I wake up curled in a fetal position on a 3-inch memory foam mattress topper that I cut to fit the contours of a Num Hai Ning Kong Trum Mui Sao Honda Odyssey trunk. The first thing I notice every single morning is the smell. It is a specific mixture of damp upholstery and stale air that has been recycled through my own lungs for 8 hours. It smells like a sleepover that went on too long. I sit up and my neck cracks. My lower back throbs because the floor of a minivan is not actually flat even when you take the seats out. It has ridges and bolts that dig into you through the foam. I reach up and peel back the corner of the black Reflectix insulation I taped over the windows. I have to check the perimeter. I have to make sure there is not a police cruiser parked behind me. I have to make sure no one has boxed me in. It is pitch black outside. The coast is clear. Now the choreography begins. I cannot just open the door and step out. If I open the sliding door, the interior lights will flood the cabin and expose me to the world. So I have to crawl. I crawl on my hands and knees over the center console, which is covered in granola bar wrappers and wet wipes. I squeeze into the driver's seat. I am 42 years old. I have a master's degree in history from a state university. And every morning I have to scramble over a gear shift like a feral animal just to start my day. I start the engine and let it run for 10 minutes to defog the windows because the condensation from my breath has turned the windshield into a wall of water. I drive 3 miles to the Planet Fitness on the edge of town. This is my bathroom. This is my vanity. This is where I become a human being again. I scan my black card at the front desk. The teenager working the counter does not look up from his phone. He does not know that I am not here to run on the treadmill. He does not know that the gym bag on my shoulder contains my entire wardrobe for the week. I walk into the women's locker room and I feel a wave of anxiety. This is the danger zone. If I see a student here, if I see a parent here, if I see the principal's wife here, my entire life is over. I keep my head down. I walk to the furthest shower stall. I wear rubber flip-flops because I am terrified of foot fungus. I shower for exactly 7 minutes. The hot water is the only luxury I have left. It is the only time all day that I feel warm. I scrub the smell of the van off my skin. I use expensive shampoo because I need my hair to smell like flowers and money. I need to smell like I just walked out of a suburban colonial house with a granite countertop kitchen. I dry off and dress in the stall. I put on my slacks. I put on my blouse. I put on my blazer. I put on the pearls my grandmother gave me. I look in the mirror. The woman looking back at me does not look homeless. She looks like MS. Elena? She looks like a pillar of the community. She looks like she pays $3,500 a month in rent. I walk out of the gym and back to the van. Now comes the hard part. I cannot plug a hairdryer into the gym outlet because that looks suspicious. So I sit in the driver's seat of my van in the dark parking lot. I plug a hair straightener into a portable Jackery battery bank that I charge at school during the day. I straighten my hair in the rear view mirror using the light from my cell phone screen. It takes 20 minutes. My arms ache, but I do it. I do it because appearance is my armor. If I look perfect, no one will ask questions. If my hair is frizzy, they might look closer. They might see the dark circles under my eyes. They might see the desperation. I finish my makeup. I apply concealer to hide the exhaustion. I put on lipstick. I am ready. I drive to the high school. I arrive at 6:30 in the morning. The parking lot is empty except for the janitor's truck. This is part of the strategy. I have to be the first one there. I use my key card to enter the building. The hallway is silent and smells like floor wax. I walk into the staff lounge. This is my kitchen. I put my lunch bag in the refrigerator. It contains a sandwich I made on my lap the night before. I take a mug from the cupboard. I brew a pot of coffee using the school's supply. I drink 3 cups. I fill a travel thermos to last me through the morning. I am stealing coffee. I know it is stealing, but I cannot afford to spend $5 at Starbucks. I go to the bathroom and I steal a roll of toilet paper from the supply closet. I put it in my bag. I feel a flash of shame, but I push it down. I tell myself it is temporary. I tell myself the school district owes me this because they do not pay me enough to live. I go to my classroom, room 304. I turn on the lights. I write the date on the whiteboard, September 25th. Topic, the Great Depression. The students start arriving at 7:30. They walk in with their expensive sneakers and their smartphones. They complain about their parents. They complain about the homework. They have no idea. They look at me and they see an authority figure. They see someone who has it all figured out. I stand in front of the room and I lecture. I tell them about the Dust Bowl. I tell them about the families who lost everything and had to pack their lives into Model T Fords and drive west. I talk about the Hoovervilles. I talk about the shame of poverty in the 1930s. And as I am speaking, I feel a cold iron ball in my stomach. I am not teaching history. I am living it. I am a Hooverville of one. I am driving a modern Model T, but I perform. I smile. I sign permission slips. I listen to their drama about prom dates and college applications. I am the best actor in the world at lunch. I do not eat in the cafeteria. I eat in my classroom with the door locked. I put my head down on the desk and I close my eyes for 20 minutes. I am so tired. My body aches from the hard floor of the van. My mind is foggy, but I cannot sleep. I have to grade papers. I have to answer emails. I have to keep the machine running. When the final bell rings at 3 o'clock, the other teachers rush home. They talk about making dinner. They talk about watching Netflix. They talk about their comfortable couches. I stay. I stay until the janitor kicks me out at 6 o'clock. I tell him I am just a dedicated teacher. I tell him I love the quiet. I lie to his face every single day. He thinks I am a saint. He does not know I am staying because I have nowhere else to go. He does not know I am charging my battery bank and my phone and my laptop so I can survive the night. He does not know I am microwaving a frozen burrito to eat for dinner because I cannot cook in the van. I walk out to the parking lot as the sun is setting. I get into my Honda Odyssey. I drive to a different spot every night so I do not draw attention. Sometimes it is a park. Sometimes it is a hotel parking lot. Sometimes it is a quiet residential street. I park. I put up the black shades. I turn on a small battery-powered lantern. I grade papers on the steering wheel. I mark up essays about the American dream with a red pen. The irony is so thick I can taste it. I am sitting in a metal box grading papers about prosperity while my breath fogs up the windows. And the craziest part is that in the beginning I actually felt smart. I looked at my bank account and saw that I had not paid rent in 2 weeks. I thought I was hacking the system. I thought I was a revolutionary. I thought I was beating the game. I told myself I was like a digital nomad just without the beach. I told myself I was sacrificing comfort for financial freedom. I was arrogant. I did not realize that I was not hacking the system. The system was digesting me. I did not realize that the cold would get into my bones. I did not realize that the isolation would start to make me crazy. I felt smart at first. I thought I was winning, but that was before the winter came. That was before the loneliness set in. That was before the mask started to slip. It started with a piece of paper that weighed less than an ounce. It was a standard business envelope sitting in my mailbox on a Tuesday afternoon. It had the logo of a property management company I did not recognize. It was called something generic like Apex Residential Partners. I remember standing in the hallway of my apartment building, holding that envelope and feeling a strange vibration in my fingers. It was instinct. It was the prey sensing the predator. I walked into my kitchen and used a butter knife to slit the top of the envelope. I pulled out a single sheet of crisp white paper. The language was professional and cold. It said that due to market adjustments and recent renovations to the community common areas, my lease renewal offer was being updated. It said my new monthly rent would be $3,500. I remember laughing. I literally laughed out loud in my empty kitchen because I thought it was a typo. I thought they meant $2,500, which would still have been a stretch, but manageable. I called the number on the letter immediately. A woman with a very cheerful voice answered. I told her there must be a mistake. I told her I had been a tenant for 5 years and never missed a payment. She typed something on her keyboard and I could hear the clicking sounds. She came back on the line and said there was no mistake. She said the ownership had changed and the new rates were non-negotiable. She said if I did not wish to renew, I had 30 days to vacate. I sat down on the floor. I did not sit on a chair. I slid down the refrigerator door until I hit the linoleum. $3,500. That was 85% of my take-home pay. If I signed that lease, I would have $600 left for the entire month to cover food and gas and electricity and insurance and my student loans. It was impossible. It was not difficult. It was mathematically impossible, but my brain was still functioning in problem-solving mode. I told myself that this was just a signal to leave. I told myself I would find a cheaper place. I opened my laptop and started searching. I went to every listing site on the internet. I typed in my maximum budget, which was $2,200. That was what I was paying before. Surely I could find another one-bedroom apartment for $2,200. But as I scrolled through the listings, I felt the walls closing in. Every apartment in that price range was either 40 miles away from my school or it was in a condition that looked unsafe. But I was desperate. I made an appointment to see a unit at a complex called the Oaks. It was 20 minutes further out. The photos looked dark, but I told myself I could fix it up with lamps and plants. I met the property manager there on a Thursday. She was wearing a suit that looked too big for her. She unlocked the door and the smell hit me instantly. It smelled like old carpet and damp drywall. The windows were small. The appliances were from the 1990s. It was a downgrade in every possible way. But the price was listed at $2,100. I could afford it. Barely. I told her I would take it. I told her I was a teacher with a steady government job. I pulled out my checkbook right there. And then she smiled and pulled out a calculator. She said that was great news. She said she just needed to go over the move-in costs. She said because my credit score was good, she only required the first month of rent and the last month of rent and a security deposit equal to 1 month of rent. She started typing the numbers. 2,100 times 3. She turned the calculator toward me. The number on the screen was $6,300, plus a $500 administration fee. Total move-in cost was $6,800. I stared at that number and I felt the blood leave my head. I looked at her and asked if I could pay the deposit in installments. She shook her head. She said it was company policy. Certified funds only. Due at signing. I walked out of that apartment and sat in my car and I cried. I cried because for the first time in my life I realized that income does not matter if you do not have liquidity. I earn $68,000 a year, but I do not have $6,800 sitting in a savings account. I do not have it because for the last 15 years I've been sending $600 every single month to the federal government to pay for the master's degree that allows me to teach in the first place. That is $7,200 a year leaving my pocket for a debt that never seems to go down. I have paid over $100,000 toward my student loans and the balance is still $55,000 because of the interest. That money could have been my move-in deposit. That money could have been my safety net. But instead it is just a line item on a credit report. I drove home that night realizing I was in a trap that had no door. I could not stay in my current apartment because I did not have the income. I could not move to a cheaper apartment because I did not have the savings. I looked at moving trucks. A rental truck would cost $400. Hiring movers would cost another $500. Even the act of leaving was too expensive. I looked at my bank account. I had $412. That was it. That was my net worth. After 15 years of working, I was too rich to qualify for housing assistance. I made too much money to get food stamps, but I was too poor to rent a roof over my head. The system assumes you have a pile of cash sitting in the bank for transitions. It assumes you have parents you can borrow from. It assumes you have a credit card with a $10,000 limit. I had none of those things. I was an island. I sat in my living room surrounded by the furniture I had collected over a decade. The bookshelf I bought when I got tenure, the comfortable armchair where I graded papers, the dining table where I hosted Thanksgiving for my friends, and I realized I had to lose it all. I had to liquidate my life because I could not afford the $6,000 admission ticket to a new life. That was the moment my eyes landed on the Honda Odyssey parked in the street below. I looked out the window and saw it sitting under the street lamp. It was paid off. It had tinted windows. It had stow and go seating that folded flat into the floor. I did not see a car. I saw a life raft. I did not want to do it. The thought made me nauseous, but I did the math. A storage unit was $300 a month. A gym membership was $25 a month. If I moved into the van, I could save $3,000 a month. In 6 months, I would have $18,000. I could pay off a chunk of my debt. I could save for a down payment on a house. I convinced myself it was a strategic financial decision. I convinced myself it was a temporary sacrifice. I did not know then that I was stepping off a cliff. I did not know that once you fall out of the housing market, it is almost impossible to climb back in. I just knew I had 30 days to get out. So I started selling everything. I sold the armchair. I sold the dining table. I sold my books. Every time a stranger walked out of my apartment carrying a piece of my life, I felt a little bit of my soul go with them. I was erasing myself. I was dismantling the evidence that Elena, the teacher, existed. And by the end of the month, all that was left was an air mattress on the floor and a pile of boxes destined for a 5x5 storage locker. I handed my keys to the landlord on the 31st of August. I walked out to the van with 2 suitcases and a pillow. I sat in the driver's seat and locked the doors. And for the first time in 15 years, I was homeless. I told myself it was just an adventure. I told myself I was smart. I told myself I was free. But deep down I knew I hadn't improvised. I had surrendered. I couldn't afford to stay and I couldn't afford to move, so I just ceased to exist in the world of addresses and mailboxes. I became a ghost. The strangest thing about falling off a cliff is that for the first few seconds, it actually feels like flying. You do not feel the impact yet. You just feel the rush of air and the sudden absence of gravity. That is exactly what the first 2 weeks of living in the Honda Odyssey felt like. It felt like an illicit vacation from reality. I remember driving away from my apartment complex for the last time. I watched the building disappear in my rear view mirror, and instead of feeling sad, I felt a surge of adrenaline. I had $3,000 in cash in an envelope in the glove compartment. That was the money I made from selling my life. I sold my leather sofa for $800 to a young couple who looked at me with pity. I sold my dining set. I sold my television. I sold my collection of vintage maps. Every time I handed over an object and took the cash, I felt lighter. I felt like I was shedding a skin. I told myself that material possessions were a trap. I told myself that I was evolving beyond the need for things. I drove to a hardware store and spent $200 on supplies to convert the van. This was the fun part. This was the part that felt like a project I saw on the internet. I bought rolls of black Reflectix insulation. I bought heavy-duty Velcro. I bought a plastic storage bin that would serve as my pantry and my nightstand. I sat in the parking lot of the hardware store with a pair of scissors and a measuring tape. I carefully cut the insulation to fit the exact shape of the van windows. I was meticulous. I wanted it to be perfect. When I put them up and closed the doors, the interior of the van became a pitch black capsule. It was private. It was cozy. It felt like a fort I would have built as a child. I spent hours watching videos on my phone about something called stealth camping. I learned the rules. Arrive late. Leave early. Never park in the same spot 2 nights in a row. Rotate between hotel parking lots and 24-hour gyms and quiet industrial parks. I watched beautiful young people on YouTube who made van life look like a permanent holiday. They parked on beaches in California. They opened their back doors to watch the sunset over the mountains. They brewed artisanal coffee on portable stoves. I watched them and I thought, I am one of them now. I am part of this secret club of people who have figured out that paying rent is a scam. The first night was actually exciting. I parked on a dead-end street in a wealthy neighborhood. I lay on my foam mattress in the back and listened to the silence. I felt like a spy. I was sleeping in a neighborhood where the average home cost $1.2 million and I was doing it for free. I felt a smug sense of superiority. I thought about all the people inside those houses worrying about their mortgages and their property taxes and their lawn maintenance. I had none of those worries. I was a ghost in the machine, but the real dopamine hit came on the 1st of the month. This is the moment that hooked me. On the 1st of October, my paycheck was deposited into my bank account, $2,050 for the pay period. Usually that entire check and half of the next one would vanish instantly to pay my landlord. I would watch the number appear and then disappear within seconds. But this time, the number stayed. I refreshed the banking application on my phone. $2,050. It was still there. I went to the gas station and bought a tank of gas for $40. I bought a sandwich for $6. I refreshed the app again. $2,004. I felt rich. For the first time in 15 years, I had liquidity. I calculated that if I lived this way for just 2 years, I could pay off my entire student loan balance. I could wipe out the $55,000 of debt that had been hanging around my neck since I was 25 years old. I started doing mental math all day long. I would look at a house and think about how much money they were wasting on heat and electricity. I would look at my colleagues in the staff lounge complaining about utility bills, and I would smile to myself. I felt like I had a secret superpower. I told myself that the discomfort was just part of the training. Yes, my back hurt a little from the thin mattress. Yes, it was annoying to have to drive to a gas station to use the bathroom, but I told myself this was character building. I told myself I was becoming tougher. I was becoming resilient. I treated the van like a puzzle to be solved. I organized my clothes into packing cubes. I had a system for everything. I had a bag for dirty laundry. I had a bag for clean laundry. I had a specific spot for my toothbrush. I kept the van spotless because chaos in a 60 square foot space is unbearable. I would go to the library after school and stay until they closed at 9 o'clock. I would sit in a comfortable chair and use their Wi-Fi and charge my devices. I felt productive. I was reading more books. I was writing in my journal. I convinced myself that stripped of my apartment, I was becoming a more intellectual version of myself. I was living the life of the mind. I was a modern-day philosopher living on the margins of society by choice. That was the lie I told myself. By choice? I repeated that phrase over and over again. I am doing this by choice. I am doing this to get ahead. I am doing this to win. I did not want to admit that I was doing this because a private equity firm held a gun to my head. I wanted to believe I was the protagonist of an adventure story, not the victim of an economic tragedy. And for those first few weeks, the weather was perfect. It was late September and early October. The nights were crisp and cool, around 50 degrees. It was perfect sleeping weather. I would crack the window open just a tiny bit for ventilation and snuggle under my down comforter. It felt like camping. It felt like a retreat. I would wake up in the morning feeling rested and resourceful. I would drive to the gym and shower and go to work and look at my growing savings account and feel a sense of triumph. I had $3,000 in the bank, then $4,000, then $5,000. I had never seen $5,000 in my savings account in my entire life. It was intoxicating. It covered up the cracks in the foundation. It blinded me to the reality of what I was actually doing to my body and my psyche. I was high on the numbers. I was high on the illusion of control. But a minivan is not an apartment. A minivan is a metal box with single pane glass windows and zero insulation. A minivan is not designed to sustain human life. It is designed to transport soccer teams to practice and groceries to the suburbs. And as October faded into November, the illusion began to shatter. The first crack appeared with the temperature. The nights stopped being crisp and started being cold. Not pleasant cold, bone-deep cold. The kind of cold that wakes you up at 3 in the morning, shivering so hard your teeth clatter. The kind of cold that seeps through the floorboards and ignores your down comforter. I remember the first night I saw my breath inside the van. I turned on my little battery lantern and I could see the white puff of air leaving my mouth. I touched the window and it was wet. The condensation had frozen on the inside of the glass. I realized then that the metal box I was living in was not a fortress. It was a refrigerator, and winter was coming.
That chill you just felt is the reality of physics catching up with the fantasy of finance. Elena was about to learn that you cannot optimize your way out of basic human needs. We are going to take a short break, but when we come back, the temperature drops. The paranoia rises, and the double life that Elena built so carefully begins to unravel. She thinks she is a ghost, but people are starting to notice the haunting. Stay with us.
The sound of a knuckles rapping against glass at 2 o'clock in the morning is not just a sound, it is a physical violation. It hits your nervous system like an electric shock. I was parked in the back corner of a 24-hour superstore parking lot. I had chosen the spot carefully. I was under a burnt-out street lamp, so I was in the shadows. I was far away from the entrance. I thought I was safe. I had finally drifted into a shallow, restless sleep when it happened. Bang, bang, bang. 3 sharp hits right next to my head. I woke up gasping for air. My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it would crack them. I saw a beam of white light cutting through the gap in my blackout shades. It was slicing through the darkness of the van like a laser. I froze. The reptilian part of my brain said if I do not move, maybe the predator will go away. But then it came again. Louder this time. Police. Open up. The voice was deep and aggressive. I scrambled to find my glasses in the dark. My hands were shaking so badly I knocked over my water bottle and it spilled onto the mattress. I felt the cold water soak into my pajamas, but I did not care. I unlocked the driver's side door and cracked it open. The beam of the flashlight hit me directly in the eyes. I was blinded. I put my hand up to shield my face and I saw the silhouette of a security guard, not a police officer. But the badge on his chest looked real enough. He told me I could not sleep here. He said this is private property. He said they have a no overnight parking policy. I tried to speak, but my voice was a croak. I tried to summon my teacher voice, the voice of authority, the voice that commands respect, but I was not a teacher in that moment. I was a middle-aged woman in flannel pajamas with messy hair begging a stranger for permission to exist. I told him I was just resting my eyes. I told him I was driving to visit family. I lied. I lied to a man half my age. He did not care. He told me to move along or he would call the tow truck. I closed the door and locked it. My hands were trembling so much I could barely turn the key in the ignition. I drove out of that parking lot with tears streaming down my face. It was 2:15 in the morning. I had to be at school in 4 hours, and I had nowhere to go. I drove to a residential street 3 miles away. I parked in front of a dark house. I turned off the engine and sat there in the silence. I was terrified. Every car that drove by made me flinch. Every shadow looked like a threat. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling of the van, listening to the wind and waiting for the sun to rise. That is when the sleep deprivation truly began. You do not realize how much energy it takes to be constantly vigilant until you cannot stop. My brain was running a marathon 24 hours a day. Even when I was sleeping, I was listening. I was waiting for the knock. And the next day at school, the cracks began to show. I was standing in front of my third period class. We were discussing the Treaty of Versailles. A student named Jason raised his hand. Jason is a good kid. He is curious. He asked a simple question about the reparations payments. But my brain was so fogged with exhaustion that I could not process his words. I just stared at him. The room felt like it was spinning. The fluorescent lights were humming so loud it hurt my teeth. He asked the question again. Miss Elena, are you okay? And I snapped. I slammed my hand down on the podium. I yelled at him to stop interrupting me. The sound of my own voice shocked me. It was shrill and angry. The entire class went silent. 30 teenagers stared at me with wide eyes. They had never heard me raise my voice in 15 years. The silence stretched on for 5 seconds. 10 seconds. I felt the heat rising in my cheeks. I mumbled an apology. I said I had a headache. I turned back to the whiteboard and my hand was shaking so hard I could not write legibly. I was terrified. I thought they knew. I thought they could smell the fear on me. I thought they could see the dark circles under the makeup. Paranoia is a parasite. It eats you from the inside out. I started avoiding the staff lounge because I was afraid someone would ask me what I did over the weekend. What could I say? I spent 8 hours in a library and 12 hours in a parking lot. I started eating lunch in my car, but even that became dangerous. One day I was sitting in the van, eating a yogurt and grading papers. I had the side door cracked open for air. I heard laughter. I looked up and saw 3 of the cheerleaders walking through the parking lot. They were walking right toward me. My van was filled with my life. There were clothes hanging from the grab handles. There were boxes of food on the floor. There was a sleeping bag unrolled in the back. If they looked inside, they would see everything. They would see that their history teacher was a vagrant. I threw myself into the back seat. I scrambled over the console and pulled the door shut. I locked it and ducked down below the window line. I held my breath. I lay on the floor of my van, hiding from 16-year-old girls. I heard them walk past. They were talking about prom dresses. They had no idea that 5 feet away, a grown woman was cowering on the floor like a fugitive. That was the moment the dignity finally died. I realized I was living a double life that was unsustainable. I was expending 90% of my energy just trying to maintain the illusion of normalcy. I was exhausted. I was irritable. I was scared all the time. And the worst part was the logistics. Simple things that used to take 5 minutes now took an hour. Getting water meant driving to a grocery store to fill jugs. Going to the bathroom meant finding a gas station that was open and buying a pack of gum, so I was a paying customer. Washing my clothes meant sitting in a laundromat for 2 hours on a Sunday watching my blazers spin round and round while I guarded my quarters. I was working harder than I had ever worked in my life just to stay at zero. I thought I was hacking the system. I thought I was being efficient. But as I lay there on the floor of the van listening to those girls walk away, I did a new kind of math in my head. I added up the gas I was burning to stay warm. I added up the prepared food I was buying because I could not cook. I added up the laundromat fees. I added up the storage unit costs. I added up the cost of the coffee I needed to stay awake. And then I realized the terrifying truth. I was not saving $3,000 a month. I was barely breaking even. I was trading my sanity for pennies. And the financial hole I was in was not getting shallower. It was getting deeper. There is a term in economics called the poverty penalty. It basically means that it is expensive to be poor. When you have money, you can buy toilet paper in bulk. You can buy a 50-pound bag of rice for $20 that lasts you 3 months. You can cook a healthy meal in your kitchen for $4 per serving. But when you are living in a van, you lose the economy of scale. You lose the infrastructure of efficiency. I remember sitting in the driver's seat one Sunday morning with my notebook. I was trying to figure out why my bank account was not growing as fast as I thought it would. I had this fantasy that I was saving $3,500 a month. That was the rent I was not paying. So in my head, I should have been stacking cash like a drug dealer. But when I looked at the actual transaction history on my banking application, the numbers told a different horror story. Let us start with the storage unit. When you move into a 60 square foot vehicle, you have to put your life somewhere. You cannot just throw away your winter coats and your tax documents and your grandmother's china. So I rented a 10 by 10 climate controlled unit at a facility on the edge of town. The introductory rate was $100. But just like the apartment complex, they raised the rate after 3 months. Now I am paying $300 a month to house my furniture. Think about the absurdity of that. I am paying $300 a month for a concrete box that lives better than I do. My sofa is in a climate-controlled room kept at a perfect 72 degrees while I am freezing in a parking lot. I visit that unit once a week to swap out clothes. It feels like visiting a mausoleum. It feels like paying rent for a ghost. Then there is the food. This was the silent killer. When you have a kitchen, you can make a pot of chili that costs $10 and lasts for 5 days. When you live in a van, you have no refrigerator. You have no stove. You have no microwave unless you are at work. This means you are forced to buy prepared food. You are forced to buy single-serving items. I would go to the grocery store and buy a prepackaged salad for $12. I would buy a rotisserie chicken for $8, but I would have to eat it all in one sitting or throw it away because I could not store the leftovers safely. If I wanted a hot meal at night, I had to order takeout. A bowl of noodles and a drink is $20. If you do that every night, that is $600 a month just for dinner. Add in breakfast, add in lunch on the weekends. I was spending $800 a month on food. And the worst part is that it was terrible food. It was high sodium. It was processed. I was gaining weight. I was puffy and lethargic because I was running on preservatives and sugar. I was eating like a king financially, but I was feeling like a peasant physically. Then there is the energy cost. We do not think about this when we live in apartments because the heat is just there. But in a van, heat is fuel. When the temperature dropped below 30 degrees at night, I had to run the engine. I would wake up shivering and turn the key. I would let the engine idle for 20 minutes to blast the heat. Then I would turn it off and try to sleep before the cold crept back in. I was doing this 5 or 6 times a night. An idling engine burns a lot of gas. I was filling my tank every 3 days. I was spending $400 a month on gasoline. And half the time I was not even going anywhere. I was just burning dinosaurs to keep from getting hypothermia. And then there are the invisible costs. The costs of maintaining dignity. The gym membership for the shower is $25. The laundromat is expensive when you are washing small loads because you have nowhere to store dirty clothes. That is $40 a month. I had to rent a private mailbox at a shipping center because I could not use the school address for my personal mail and I could not use a P.O. box for certain bank documents. That is $30 a month. I spent $5 a day at coffee shops on the weekends just so I had a place to sit inside where it was warm and there was Wi-Fi. That is $150 a month just for the privilege of sitting in a chair. When I added it all up, I felt sick. Storage, food, gas, gym, laundry, mailbox, coffee. The total was nearly $1,800 a month. I was spending almost $2,000 a month to be homeless. I was spending nearly the same amount as my old rent of $2,200, but I had none of the comfort. I had no toilet. I had no shower. I had no kitchen. I had no safety. I was working a full-time job. I was a respected professional, and I was hemorrhaging money just to survive the night. I looked at that number in my notebook and I realized I had been scammed, not by a person, but by the idea that you can beat the system by opting out. You cannot opt out. The system is designed to extract value from you, whether you are in a penthouse or a parking lot. In fact, it extracts more value from you when you are vulnerable. I was paying a premium for everything because I had no infrastructure. I was paying the homeless tax. I realized that my savings were not growing, they were stagnant. I was stuck at that initial $5,000 mark. I was not paying down my debt. I was just treading water in a much colder, much darker ocean. And physically, I was deteriorating. My back was in constant spasms from the bad mattress. My skin was breaking out from the stress and the bad food. My eyes were always red. I was aging, and fast forward, I would look in the rearview mirror and see a woman who looked 10 years older than the one who moved out of her apartment 3 months ago. I was exhausted. I was lonely. I was broke. And I was trapped. I could not afford to move back into an apartment because I still did not have the deposit money. And I could not afford to stay in the van because it was slowly killing me. I was praying for a miracle. I was praying for a tax refund. I was praying for a raise. I was praying for anything that would break this stalemate. But the universe did not send a miracle. It sent a catastrophe. It sent the one thing I had not budgeted for, the one thing that holds the entire house of cards together. The machine itself, I was treading water trying to keep my nose above the surface. And then the wave hit. It was a Tuesday afternoon. It was raining. And I heard a sound that made my blood run cold.
Elena just described the trap of the poverty penalty perfectly. It is the reason why it is so hard to climb out of a hole once you fall in. You are running twice as hard just to stay in the same place. She was spending $2,000 a month to live in a metal box. She was paying for the privilege of suffering. And she was right. The system is designed to penalize you for not having infrastructure. If you do not have a kitchen, you pay more for food. If you do not have a bedroom, you pay more for heat. It is a vicious cycle. And notice how she mentioned that her savings were stagnant. She had that initial $5,000 from selling her furniture, but she could not add to it. That $5,000 was her only shield. It was her only buffer against the world. And in the world of vehicle dependency, $5,000 can disappear in the blink of an eye. We are about to move into the final act of this tragedy. We are about to see what happens when the precarious equilibrium collapses. Elena is driving a Nam Hai Ing Kong Tromusao Honda Odyssey with 140,000 miles on it. That van is her bedroom. It is her living room. It is her closet. It is her sanctuary. But it is also a machine. And machines break. Machines do not care about your credit score. Machines do not care about your tenure. Machines just wear out. And when the machine that is also your house breaks down, you enter a new level of crisis. You enter a level of crisis where money is no longer just about comfort. It is about survival. It is about whether you end up in a shelter or whether you can claw your way back to dignity. Listen to the sound she heard. Listen to the moment the floor fell out from under her.
The sound of a dying transmission is not a grind. It is a whine. It starts low, like a tea kettle boiling in the next room, and then it rises to a scream that vibrates through the floorboards and into your shoes. I was on the interstate driving 65 miles per hour in the middle lane. It was raining. The kind of gray, relentless rain that turns the highway into a mirror. I was listening to a podcast about history because I was trying to distract myself from the fact that I had to park in a Walmart lot again that night. I pressed my foot down on the accelerator to pass a semi-truck. The engine roared. The tachometer needle swung all the way to the red line, but the van did not speed up. It felt like I had stepped on a patch of black ice. The engine was screaming, but the wheels were disconnected. I felt a lurch in my stomach that was pure primal fear. I took my foot off the gas and the van slowed down instantly. The semi-truck behind me blasted its horn. I saw the grill of the truck filling my entire rearview mirror. I put my hazard lights on. I wrestled the steering wheel to the right, trying to cut across 2 lanes of traffic with no power. It is terrifying how heavy a vehicle becomes when the engine stops pulling. I coasted onto the shoulder of the highway just as the momentum died. I sat there with the 18-wheelers, shaking the van as they flew past. The engine was idling rough. The check engine light was flashing. That little orange light is the most expensive light in the world. I turned the key off. I sat in the silence and listened to the rain hitting the roof. I knew, deep down in my gut, I knew. This was not a flat tire. This was not a dead battery. This was the heart of the beast, failing. I turned the key again. The engine started, but when I shifted into drive, nothing happened. It was just a neutral slide. I shifted into low gear and managed to get the wheels to catch. I limped the van off the next exit at 20 miles per hour with the hazard lights flashing. I drove 3 miles to a transmission shop I found on Google Maps. It was 4:30 in the afternoon. I pulled into the lot just as the mechanic was walking out to lock the gate. I rolled down my window and begged him to look at it. He was a kind man. He had grease in the creases of his hands and he looked tired. He told me to pull it into the bay. I sat in the waiting room for an hour. It smelled like burnt rubber and stale coffee. There was a television in the corner playing a daytime talk show. I stared at the screen, but I could not understand the words. I was doing mental math. I had $5,000 in my savings account. That was my entire life savings. That was my escape fund. That was the money I had suffered for 3 months to accumulate. The mechanic walked into the waiting room, wiping his hands on a blue rag. He did not look happy. He told me the transmission was toast. He used that word. Toast. He said the torque converter had failed and sent metal shavings through the entire system. He said it could not be repaired. It had to be rebuilt or replaced. I asked him how much. He looked at his clipboard. He said parts and labor would come to $4,200. $4,200. The room started to spin. I felt the bile rising in my throat. I asked him if there was a cheaper option. He shook his head. He said I could put in a used transmission from a junkyard for $3,000, but it might only last a month. He said if I wanted a warranty, I needed the rebuild. I looked at him and I realized he did not know he was sentencing me to death. He thought he was just fixing a car. He did not know he was evicting me. He did not know that the $4,200 was 85% of my net worth. I told him to do it. I had no choice. I could not drive the van, and I could not live in a broken van. I handed him my debit card. My hand was shaking, but then I stopped. I pulled my hand back. I thought about emptying my savings account. If I paid cash, I would have $800 left to my name. One mechanical failure, and I would be at zero. I asked him if they had financing. He pointed to a brochure on the counter for a credit card specifically for car repairs. He said they offer 6 months with no interest if you qualify. I felt a surge of hope. I have a master's degree. I have a full-time job. I have never missed a rent payment in my life. I filled out the application on an iPad. I typed in my salary, $68,000. I typed in my social security number. I hit submit. The little wheel on the screen spun for 30 seconds. It felt like 30 years. Then the screen turned red, declined. I stared at it. I asked him why. He looked at the screen and read the rejection code. High debt to income ratio. It was the student loans, even though I was homeless, even though I was sleeping in a parking lot. The $55,000 of federal debt that I took out to become a teacher was still counting against me. The algorithm did not care that I had a job. It only saw that I owed more money than I could ever pay back. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. I quickly wiped it away. I could not let him see me cry. I opened my wallet and pulled out a credit card I had sworn I would never use. It was a Visa card I got in my 20s. The limit was $5,000. The interest rate was 29.99%. It was a predatory card. It was a shark in plastic form. I handed it to him. He swiped it. The machine beeped. Approved. I felt sick. I had just signed a contract to pay 29% interest on my own survival. I did the math in my head instantly because I cannot help myself. At that interest rate, the interest alone would be $100 a month. I was not paying for the repair. I was renting the money to pay for the repair. The mechanic handed me the receipt. He said it would take 3 days to get the parts and finish the work. 3 days. I looked at him. I asked him if I could sleep in the van while it was in the shop. He looked at me like I was crazy. He said, absolutely not. He said, for insurance reasons, no one is allowed in the vehicles overnight. He said they lock the gates at 6. I nodded. Of course. I walked out to the van to grab my bag. I had to pack a bag to survive 3 days without my home. I grabbed my toothbrush. I grabbed a change of clothes. I grabbed my laptop. I stood in the parking lot in the rain, holding a duffel bag, staring at my home on a hydraulic lift. I had nowhere to go. I could not afford a hotel for 3 nights. That would cost another $500. I checked my bank account. I still had the cash savings, but now I had a maxed out credit card hanging over my head. I was paralyzed. I stood there in the lobby while the mechanic turned off the lights in the bay. I was trying to figure out if I should sleep in the waiting room or walk to a shelter. And then my phone rang. The sound was so loud in the quiet shop that I jumped. I looked at the screen. It was the vice principal of the high school. It was 5:30 in the evening. Why was he calling me? My heart stopped. I thought someone had found out. I thought someone had seen the police report from the parking lot. I thought the game was over. I answered the phone with a trembling voice. I said, hello. He sounded frantic. He said, Elena, I am so glad I caught you. He said, the district superintendent is coming for a surprise walkthrough tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. He said they are specifically looking at the history department's curriculum adherence. He said, I need you to have your lesson plans for the entire semester printed out and on your desk when you arrive. He said, make sure your classroom is spotless. He said, we are counting on you, Elena. You are our rock. He hung up. I stood there holding the phone. The irony was so sharp it felt like a knife in my ribs. He wanted me to be the rock. He wanted me to be the perfect professional. He wanted spotless lesson plans. He had no idea that his rock was standing in a mechanic shop with a duffel bag wondering which park bench was the driest. He had no idea that I was about to spend the night on the street. I looked at the mechanic. He was waiting for me to leave so he could lock the door. I walked out into the rain. I walked to the sidewalk. I looked left toward the highway and right toward the town. I started walking toward the town. I walked past a motel with a flashing neon sign that said no vacancy. I walked past a restaurant where families were eating dinner. I saw a father cutting a steak for his daughter. I saw the warmth of the room through the glass. I felt like an alien species. I walked until I found a 24-hour laundromat. It was warm inside. There were a few people sitting in plastic chairs watching their clothes spin. I walked in and sat in the back corner. I put my duffel bag on my lap. I pulled out my laptop. I opened my lesson plan document, and I started typing. I typed about the causes of the Great Depression. I typed about the collapse of the banking system. I typed about the Dust Bowl refugees. I sat in a laundromat for 8 hours that night. I typed until my battery died. I slept for 20 minutes at a time, sitting upright in a hard plastic chair. I was a teacher. I was a professional. I was a homeless woman with a maxed out credit card, and I was about to go to work and pretend that none of this was happening. I thought the financial pressure was the worst part of this nightmare. I was wrong. The worst part is the constant terror of being seen. It is the feeling of being an imposter in your own life. It is the feeling that you are walking around with a scarlet letter branded on your forehead that only becomes visible under certain lights. That terror reached a breaking point earlier this week. It was Tuesday morning, just 2 days before the transmission failed. I had arrived at school early as usual. I usually use the single-stall faculty restroom near the teacher's lounge to brush my teeth and wash my face. It is the only place where I have privacy. But on this morning, the faculty restroom was locked. The janitor was cleaning it. I panicked. I had slept in the van. My mouth tasted like stale air. My face felt oily. I could not start my day like that. So I made a reckless decision. I went down to the student locker room next to the gymnasium. I knew the students did not arrive until 7:30. I thought I was safe. I walked into the cavernous room that smelled of rubber mats and industrial disinfectant. I stood at one of the sinks in the back corner. I laid out my toiletries on the porcelain, my toothbrush, my toothpaste, a bottle of dry shampoo, a washcloth. I was scrubbing my face with cold water, trying to wake myself up. I had soap in my eyes. And then I heard the heavy metal door creak open. The sound echoed off the tile walls like a gunshot. I froze. I had a towel pressed to my face. I prayed it was a student. If it was a student, I could reprimand them for being early. I could take control. But it was not a student. I lowered the towel and looked in the mirror. Standing behind me in the reflection was Coach Miller. He is the gym teacher. He has been at the school for 20 years. He is a nice man. He brings donuts on Fridays. He coaches the football team, and he was staring at me with a look of pure confusion. I felt my heart stop beating. I was standing there with wet hair and a travel bag full of toiletries at 6:45 in the morning in a student locker room. There was no way to explain this away. There was no way to make this look normal. He took a step forward. He asked me simply, "Elena, is everything okay?" His voice was low. It was the voice you use when you are talking to a frightened animal. And in that moment, I had a choice. I could have told him the truth. I could have collapsed on the floor and told him that I was homeless. I could have told him that I was sleeping in a Honda Odyssey. I could have asked for help, but the shame was too strong. It rose up in my throat like bile. I could not let him see me. I could not let him know that the respected history teacher was a vagrant, so I lied. I looked him right in the eye and I lied with a speed that frightened me. I told him my water heater had burst in the middle of the night. I told him my apartment was flooded and I had to turn off the water main so I could not shower at home. It was a brilliant lie. It was a middle-class lie. It was a problem that homeowners have. It implied that I had a home. It implied that I had plumbing. It implied that this was just a temporary inconvenience and not a systemic collapse of my existence. I watched his face. I saw the confusion melt away into sympathy. He nodded. He said, "Oh man, that is the worst." He said he had that happen last year and it cost him $2,000 to fix. He said, "Let me know if you need the name of a good plumber." I smiled. I forced my mouth to curve upward. I said, "Thank you, I have it covered." He walked away to his office. I stood there gripping the edge of the sink until my knuckles turned white. I had it covered. That was the biggest lie of all. I did not have it covered. I did not have a water heater. I did not have a plumber. I did not have $2,000. I shook uncontrollably for 10 minutes. I realized then how fragile my cover actually was. I was one rumor away from ruin. If Coach Miller mentioned this to the principal, if he mentioned it to the school nurse, people would start watching me. They would notice that I wore the same 3 blazers in rotation. They would notice that I never talked about my weekend. They would notice that my car was filled with boxes. Teachers have a morality clause in their contracts. We can be fired for conduct that reflects poorly on the district. Being homeless is not a crime, but in the eyes of the administration, it is a liability. It suggests instability. It suggests irresponsibility. If parents found out that their children were being taught by a woman who sleeps in a parking lot, they would demand my resignation. They would say, I am not a role model. They would say, I am dangerous. I finished brushing my teeth that morning with a sense of doom hanging over me. I felt dirty, not just physically dirty, but morally dirty. I felt like a fraud. I felt like I was stealing my salary. I walked into my classroom that day and I could barely look my students in the eye. When I taught the lesson on the Great Depression, I felt like a hypocrite. I was telling them about the resilience of the human spirit, but I was hiding my own struggle because I was too proud to admit I was failing. And now flash forward to the laundromat. It is 3 days after the locker room incident. The van is in the shop. I have spent the night sitting in a hard plastic chair typing lesson plans. I have not showered in 24 hours. I have not brushed my teeth. I am wearing the same clothes I wore yesterday because my fresh clothes are locked in the van. The sun is coming up over the strip mall across the street. It is 7 in the morning. I have to go to school. I have to face the superintendent. I have to present my curriculum. And I smell. I smell like stale sweat and nervous exhaustion. I smell like the inside of a laundromat. I smell like poverty. I cannot lie about a water heater today. I cannot hide in the gym locker room today. I am exposed. I am raw. I am walking into a professional environment looking like a woman who has lost everything because I am a woman who has lost everything. I pack up my laptop. I put the strap of my bag over my shoulder. It feels heavy. It feels like it contains the weight of the entire world. I walk out of the laundromat and onto the street. The morning air is cold. I start walking toward the school. It is a 2-mile walk. I am praying that it does not rain again. I am praying that no one sees me walking on the side of the road. I am praying that I can make it through the next 8 hours without falling apart. But deep down, I know I cannot keep doing this. I know the rope has run out. I am walking toward a dead end and I am too scared to stop.
Elena is describing the psychological prison of the working homeless. It is not just about the lack of money. It is about the isolation. It is about the secrets. When she lied to Coach Miller, she built a wall between herself and the only people who could possibly help her. She chose dignity over survival. And now she is paying the price. She is about to walk into her school for a high-stakes inspection in the worst physical condition of her life. She is sleep-deprived. She is unwashed. She is terrified. This is the moment where the rubber meets the road. This is the moment where the facade crumbles. She has no car to hide in. She has no story to hide behind. She is just a human being pushed to the absolute limit of endurance. And she is about to ask the question that every single person in this situation eventually asks. The question that has no easy answer.
The neon sign above the motel office buzzes like an angry hornet. It flickers between red and darkness. It spells out vacancy, but the V is burnt out, so it just says vacancy. I am standing at the front desk. The man behind the glass is watching a soccer game on a small television. He does not look at me when he asks for my credit card. I hand it to him. It is my debit card. The one linked to my dwindling savings account. He swipes it. He says that will be $120 plus tax plus a $50 incidentals deposit. $170 leaving my account instantly. I feel a physical pain in my chest. That is money I needed for food. That is money I needed for the mechanic. But I have no choice. I cannot sleep in a laundromat again. I cannot walk the streets for another night. I need a door that locks. I need a shower. I take the key card. Room 104. I walk across the parking lot. The asphalt is cracked and weeds are growing through the fissures. I open the door to the room. It smells like stale cigarette smoke and industrial lemon cleaner. The carpet is sticky. The bedspread has a pattern of brown and orange flowers that looks like it is from 1975, but to me, it looks like heaven. I lock the door. I engage the deadbolt. I put the chain across the slide. Finally, I am safe. I drop my bag on the floor and I sit on the edge of the bed. I do not turn on the television. I do not look at my phone. I just sit there in the silence and stare at the wall. And this is when the anger comes. It starts in my stomach and moves up to my throat. It is a hot, burning anger. I look at my hands. These are hands that have graded thousands of essays. These are hands that have held the hands of crying teenagers. These are hands that accepted a diploma on a stage while my parents cheered. I followed the rules, Sam. I followed every single rule they gave me. They told me to study hard, so I did. I got straight A's. They told me to go to college, so I did. I graduated with honors. They told me to get a master's degree because that is how you get a stable career. So I borrowed $55,000 and I got the master's degree. They told me to get a job with a pension and benefits. So I became a teacher. I have worked for 15 years. I have never been fired. I have never been arrested. I have never been addicted to drugs. I am a model citizen. I am the person who is supposed to be the backbone of this country. And yet here I am. I am sitting in a motel room that costs $120 a night while my home sits broken in a mechanic's bay. I have $400 left in my bank account. I have a maxed out credit card with an interest rate that should be illegal. I have no husband to save me. I have no rich parents to bail me out. I am completely and utterly alone. And I do not understand why. I look at the ceiling and I ask the universe what I did wrong. Did I buy too many avocados? Did I drink too much coffee? Is that why I am homeless? Is that why I am terrified? No. I did the math. I lived frugally. I sacrificed, and it was not enough. The goalposts moved while I was running the race. The rent went up faster than my salary. The debt grew faster than my payments. The car broke down faster than I could save. I am playing a game that is rigged against me, and I am losing. So, Sam, I am asking you the question that keeps me awake at night, the question that I am too afraid to whisper even to myself. What do I do now? Do I keep fighting? Do I keep showing up to that classroom every day pretending to be Elena, the respected educator, while I slowly starve to death, do I quit the job I love and move to North Dakota or Ohio or somewhere where the rent is cheap, even if it means abandoning my pension and my tenure, or do I just give up? Do I file for bankruptcy and let the black mark destroy my credit score for 7 years? Do I just admit that I failed? Because right now I feel like I am standing on the edge of a cliff and the ground is crumbling under my feet. I have survived the last 3 months on adrenaline and pride, but the adrenaline is gone. The pride is gone. I am just tired. I am so incredibly tired. I do not know how to survive tonight, let alone the rest of my life. Tell me, Sam, is this it? Is this what being middle class looks like now? Or is there a way out that I am just too blind to see? Help me, please.
Elena, I want you to take a breath. I want you to listen to the silence in that motel room and realize that you are still alive. You are still here. But I also need you to listen to me very carefully because I am about to tell you the things that your friends and your colleagues are too polite to tell you. I am going to tell you the things that your own brain is refusing to accept. You asked me if you should keep fighting. You asked me if you should keep showing up to that classroom and pretending that nothing is wrong. The answer is absolutely not. You are done fighting this specific battle because you have already lost it. You are trying to bail out the Titanic with a teaspoon. You are trying to solve a structural economic collapse with a credit card and a smile. It is over. The life you are trying to protect, the life of the respected middle-class teacher in that specific expensive city, is already gone. It died the day you moved into the van. You are just carrying around the corpse and wondering why it is so heavy. You need to put it down. You asked for a plan. Here is your plan. It is going to hurt. It is going to require you to kill your ego, but it is going to save your life. Step 1 is what I call radical transparency. You are currently spending 90% of your energy hiding your situation from the very people who have the resources to help you. You are terrified that if the school finds out you are homeless, they will fire you. But the reality is that if you continue on this path, you will have a mental breakdown in front of 30 students and then they will fire you for cause. You need to control the narrative. Tomorrow morning, instead of hiding in the locker room, you are going to walk into the principal's office. You are going to close the door. And you are going to say the words that you have been choking on for 3 months. You are going to say, I am in a housing crisis and I need help. You are a union member. You pay dues for a reason. Unions often have emergency assistance funds for members in distress. School districts often have relationships with local housing authorities. By hiding, you are blocking yourself from the safety net that you have paid into for 15 years. You have to swallow your pride. You have to let Coach Miller and the vice principal see you as a human being in trouble, not just a robot who delivers history lessons. Shame is a luxury you can no longer afford. Step 2 is geographic arbitrage. You are trying to live in a city where the math does not work. You are earning $68,000 in a market where the entry fee is $100,000. You can budget until you are blue in the face, but you cannot change the cost of living in a gentrified coastal city. You need to leave. I do not mean move to the suburbs. I mean move to a different economy. You are a teacher. Your skills are portable. There are states in this country, in the Midwest, in the Rust Belt, where teachers earn $60,000 a year, but a one-bedroom apartment costs $800 a month. In Ohio or Michigan or Pennsylvania, you would not be homeless. You would be middle class. You would be saving money. You would have a living room. You are clinging to this city because it is familiar and because you think leaving is a failure. Leaving is not failure. Leaving is strategy. You need to apply for jobs in low cost of living areas tonight. You need to look at a map and find the places where your salary buys you a life, not just a parking spot. Step 3 is the nuclear option. We need to talk about that $55,000 in student loan debt and that maxed out credit card. You are drowning in unsecured debt. You are paying interest rates that would make a loan shark blush. You need to consult with a bankruptcy attorney immediately. I know the word bankruptcy sounds like a death knell. I know you think it means you are a bad person. It does not. It is a legal tool designed for exactly this situation. It is a tool designed to stop the bleeding so you do not die. A Chapter 7 or Chapter 13 filing could pause the collections. It could restructure your debt. It could give you room to breathe. Yes, it will stay on your credit report for 7 to 10 years. But guess what? You are currently homeless. Your credit score is irrelevant if you do not have a roof. You are protecting a credit score for a future you might not survive to see. You need to stop worrying about what the banks think of you and start worrying about what the stress is doing to your arteries. You asked me how to survive tonight. You survive tonight by accepting that the old Elena is gone. The Elena who cares about appearances is gone. The Elena who thinks she can outsmart the system is gone. The woman sitting in that motel room is a survivor. And survivors do what is necessary. They ask for help. They move to safer ground. They cut the dead weight. You are holding on to a life that has already evicted you, Elena. It is time to let it go. It is time to stop being a ghost in a city that does not want you and go find a place where you can actually live. You have a master's degree. You have 15 years of experience. You have value. But you are trying to sell that value in a market that has priced you out of existence. Stop banging your head against the wall. Walk through the door.
I am staring at my reflection in the motel mirror. The glass is cracked in the bottom corner and the fluorescent light above it buzzes with a low, angry hum that sounds like a trapped fly. I look at the woman in the glass. She has dark circles under her eyes that no amount of concealer can hide. Her hair is limp. Her skin is pale. She looks like a stranger. But for the first time in 3 months, I am actually seeing her. I am not seeing the version of myself I try to project to the world. I am not seeing sex. Elena, the history teacher, with the perfect lesson plans. I am seeing Elena, the human being who is drowning. You are right, Sam. You are absolutely right. I have been holding on to a corpse. I have been carrying around the dead body of my middle-class life and pretending it is still breathing. I have been grieving, but I did not know what I was grieving. I thought I was grieving the loss of my apartment. I thought I was grieving the loss of my comfort. But I was actually grieving the death of my identity. I was grieving the idea that if I followed the rules, I would be safe. That idea is dead. It died the day the private equity firm bought my building. It died the day the mechanic told me my transmission was toast. And I have been trying to perform CPR on a ghost. I have been so afraid of the word homeless. I have treated it like a dirty word. I have treated it like a moral failure. I thought that if I admitted I was homeless, I would become one of those people on the street that society looks right through. I thought I would become invisible. But the irony is that I made myself invisible to avoid being seen as a failure. I erased myself. I hid in a van. I hid in parking lots. I hid in locker rooms. I became a phantom in my own life because my pride was stronger than my survival instinct. You called it vanity. That hurts to hear, but it is the truth. It was vanity. I thought I was too good for this. I thought I was too educated for this. I thought having a master's degree meant I was immune to gravity. But gravity does not care about your degree. Gravity pulls everyone down just the same. I am sitting on this bed with the orange flowers, and I am realizing that the most exhausted part of me is not my back. It is not my legs. It is my tongue. My tongue is tired of lying. I am tired of lying to the janitor. I am tired of lying to the principal. I am tired of lying to my mother when she calls and asks how I am doing. I tell her I am fine. I tell her work is great. I tell her I am busy. I lied to the woman who gave me life because I do not want to break her heart. But I am breaking my own heart every single time I open my mouth. So tomorrow is going to be different. I am looking at the clock on the bedside table. It is 9:30 at night. In 10.5 hours, I am going to walk into the school building. I am not going to sneak in. I am not going to hide in the locker room. I am going to walk through the front doors with my head up. I am going to walk past the trophy case. I am going to walk past the student council bulletin board. I am going to walk straight into the administration office. The union representative's name is Sarah. She teaches English in the classroom next to mine. She has been asking me for weeks if I am okay, because she noticed I stopped eating lunch in the lounge. I pushed her away. I told her I was just busy. Tomorrow, I am going to find Sarah. I am going to ask her to sit down, and I am going to tell her the truth. I am going to say the words out loud. Sarah, I am homeless. I am living in my van, and my van is broken, and I have nowhere to go. I can visualize her face. She will be shocked. She might even cry. But she will not fire me. She will help me. That is what unions are for. That is what community is for. I have been rejecting the life raft because I did not want anyone to know the ship was sinking. but the ship is already at the bottom of the ocean. It is time to swim. And you are right about the geography too. I have been clinging to this city like a bad relationship. I love this city. I love the coffee shops. I love the parks. I love the way the light hits the buildings at sunset. But this city does not love me back. This city is abusive. It takes everything I have and asks for more. It demands $3,500 for a box of air. It demands that I bleed myself dry just to have a place to sleep. Why am I fighting so hard to stay in a place that wants me dead? I am a teacher. There are children in Ohio who need to learn about the Great Depression. There are children in Michigan who need to learn about the Civil Rights Movement. There are schools in this country where a teacher's salary can actually buy a house. A real house. With a front door and a kitchen and a bed that is not made of foam and a trunk. I have been so afraid of leaving because I thought it meant I was quitting. But I am not quitting. I am evacuating. I am evacuating a disaster zone. I am going to apply for those jobs. I am going to look at the map tonight. I am going to look for a place where the numbers make sense. I'm going to look for a place where I can be Elena the teacher without also being Elena the homeless woman. I know it will not be easy. I know I have a mountain of debt to climb. I know the bankruptcy attorney is going to tell me hard truths. I know my credit score is going to be ruined, but my credit score is not my soul. My net worth is not my self-worth. I have let those two things become tangled together like a knot of wires. Tomorrow, I start untangling them. I am terrified, Sam. My hands are shaking as I speak to you. I am terrified of the look on the principal's face. I am terrified of the judgment, but I am more terrified of spending one more night in that van. I am more terrified of the silence in the parking lot. I am more terrified of the cold. So I will do it. I will walk through the fire. I will take the hit to my ego. I will let the facade crumble. Because underneath the facade, there is still a person. There is still a woman who loves to teach. There is still a woman who deserves to be safe. I am going to take a shower in this motel room. I am going to use the hot water until it runs cold. I am going to wash the smell of the mechanic shop out of my hair. I am going to sleep in a bed with clean sheets. And tomorrow I am going to tell the truth. I do not care if they whisper. I do not care if they judge. I will sleep in a shelter if I have to. I will sleep on a cot in a gymnasium if I have to. But I will not lie anymore.
That silence you hear right now is the sound of a heavy burden being put down for the very first time. It is the sound of a woman deciding that her life is more important than her reputation. We have spent the last hour listening to Elena decompose the American dream. We have watched her strip away the layers of paint and drywall to reveal the rotting beams underneath. And if there is one thing I want you to take away from this episode, it is not just fear. It is not just anger at the private equity firms or the housing market. It is a profound understanding of the cost of pride. We often talk about inflation. We talk about interest rates. We talk about the cost of gasoline. But we rarely talk about the cost of maintaining an image. Elena spent thousands of dollars and months of her life trying to buy the illusion that she was still part of the middle class. She paid for storage units she did not need. She paid for gym memberships she did not want. She paid for a facade. And that facade almost cost her everything. There is a very dangerous idea in our culture that says if you are educated and hardworking, you are immune to disaster. We believe that poverty is a character flaw. We believe that homelessness is something that happens to other people. People who made bad choices. People who are lazy. But Elena proves that is a lie. Elena did not fail. The math failed. The equation of labor versus housing in the 21st century is broken. When a teacher with a master's degree cannot afford a one-bedroom apartment in the district where she teaches, we are not looking at a personal failure. We are looking at a systemic collapse. We are looking at a market that has decided that profits are more important than people. But while we cannot fix the housing market overnight, we can fix how we respond to it. Elena's mistake was not moving into the van. Her mistake was moving into the van alone. Her mistake was silence. She treated her financial crisis like a shameful secret instead of a logistical emergency. She hid from the very people who could have thrown her a rope. She hid from her union. She hid from her colleagues. She hid from her family. And in that hiding, she allowed the predator of debt to corner her. I want you to look at your own life right now. I want you to look at the secrets you are keeping. Are you hiding a credit card statement from your spouse? Are you hiding a foreclosure notice from your children? Are you pretending to be fine when you are actually drowning? If you are, I want you to listen to me very clearly. Privacy is a luxury. Secrecy is a poison. Secrecy isolates you. Secrecy prevents you from accessing the collective intelligence of your community. If Elena had walked into that principal's office 3 months ago, she might never have spent a single night in that Honda Odyssey. She might have found a roommate. She might have accessed an emergency grant. She might have found a solution before the transmission died. But she waited. She waited until the water was over her head before she admitted she could not swim. Do not make that mistake. Do not wait until you are sleeping in a parking lot to ask for help. Do not wait until the repo man is in your driveway to consult a bankruptcy attorney. There is no honor in suffering in silence. There is no trophy for enduring financial abuse alone. The system relies on your shame. The banks rely on your shame. They bank on the fact that you will pay 29% interest rather than admit you are broke. They bank on the fact that you will liquidate your retirement rather than file for bankruptcy. Stop playing their game. Stop buying the expensive luxury of pride. It is time to be radical. It is time to be transparent. It is time to look at the math and say this does not work and I am not going to pretend it does. Elena is going to be okay. It will be hard. She has a long road ahead of her. She has to file the paperwork. She has to move across the country. She has to rebuild her credit from ashes. But she is going to be okay because she has broken the spell. She has stopped lying. And in that truth, she will find her power again. I know that many of you listening to this are feeling the walls closing in. You are looking at rent prices that defy gravity. You are looking at grocery bills that make you want to cry. You are wondering if you are next. If you are feeling that anxiety, do not sit with it alone. We have built a community for exactly this reason. We have a Discord server full of people who are navigating these exact same storms. We have people discussing geographic arbitrage. We have people discussing debt restructuring. We have people who will look at your numbers without judgment and help you find a way out. Do not be an island. Join us. The link is in the show notes. Share your story in the comments below. Tell us if you have been priced out of your own city. Tell us if you are living a double life. We need to break the stigma. We need to shine a light in the dark corners of this economy so that no one else has to hide in a locker room and pretend their water heater is broken. We are all in this together. And until next time, remember that your net worth is not your self-worth. You are more than a credit score. You are more than a job title. You are a human being worthy of dignity and shelter and peace. Go to the union. Make the call. Open the door. I am Sam, and this has been Financial Therapy. Stay safe out there.